The Las Vegas Raiders have officially started looking for a new defensive coordinator. One of the first people to interview for the job is Rob Leonard. Many fans already know him. He was the Raiders' defensive line coach last season and has done a great job. According to Jeremy Fowler, Leonard had his interview on Monday. This makes him the first in-house candidate for the position. Pete Carroll, in his introductory press conference, mentioned that the team would consider coaches who were already with the Raiders last year. Rob Leonard is one of them. It's exciting to see the Raiders considering Leonard for this big role. However, being a defensive line coach is very different from being a defensive coordinator. A coordinator has to plan and call defensive plays, which is a big responsibility. Leonard has a bright future in coaching, but it's unclear if he's ready for this step. If he gets the job, Pete Carroll would likely guide him as he adjusts to this new role. At the same time, the Raiders are also keeping an eye on other coaching options. Patrick Graham, their former defensive coordinator, has been interviewing for jobs with other teams, including the Jacksonville Jaguars. If he leaves, it will be a big loss, as he's a highly respected defensive coach. For now, it's a waiting game. The Raiders are making sure they consider all their options, including keeping some of the strong defensive coaches they already have. Patrick Graham is a very strong defensive coach. Even though the Raiders struggled with injuries last season, his defense still ranked in the top 15 for fewest yards allowed per game. That's impressive. The year before that, in his second season, the defense was even better. It was the best in the league during the second half of the season and ranked in the top 10 overall. That proves Graham knows how to get results. Even last season, during the first 4 or 5 weeks, the Raiders' defense looked solid. If you watch the game footage, it's clear that Graham's coaching made a big difference. But the Raiders are doing their homework and considering all possible candidates for the defensive coordinator job. There are reports that the Raiders might have already interviewed Patrick Graham or are planning to, but no official source has confirmed it yet. On the other hand, we do know that Rob Leonard's interview is official, as Jeremy Fowler reported it. Leonard has done an excellent job coaching the defensive line, and many players respect him. Looking at next season, many of the same defensive players will likely return. Jack Jones and Jacorian Bennett are still under contract. Isaiah Pola-Mao, while technically a restricted free agent, would be easier to bring back if the Raiders choose to. Some free agents, like Nate Hobbs and Trevin Moehrig, could also return. The defensive line will likely stay mostly the same, though it's unclear if Malcolm Kunze will be retained. Rob Leonard already knows and has worked with these players, which could make him a strong choice for the defensive coordinator role. If Leonard does get the job, Pete Carroll will be there to oversee things and make sure the new defense is installed correctly. It won't be the exact same system Patrick Graham used last year. While there may be similarities, Pete Carroll's arrival could bring new defensive strategies, possibly including his famous Cover 3 defense. If Leonard becomes defensive coordinator, the Raiders' defense could look very different next season. No matter what happens, it's great that the Raiders are giving Leonard a chance. Now, before we wrap this up, let's talk a little about Pete Carroll. I just want to give you a quick update on something interesting I saw today. It involves 2 former general managers of the Las Vegas Raiders. The Tennessee Titans have added Reggie McKenzie to their front office. If you remember, McKenzie was the Raiders' general manager for about 7 or 8 years. He was well known for the incredible 2014 draft, which helped turn the team around. He did a solid job, rebuilding the roster and even leading the team to the playoffs. Now he's taking on a new role with the Titans. McKenzie isn't the only former Raiders GM joining Tennessee. Dave Ziegler has also taken a job with the Titans. So now, 2 former Raiders general managers will be working together in Tennessee. It'll be interesting to see how they help shape the Titans' future. Looking back, Ziegler was in charge of 2 drafts for the Raiders, and unfortunately those drafts weren't great. They weren't as bad as the ones under Mike Mayock and John Gruden, but there were still some questionable picks. For example, choosing Alex Leatherwood over Christian Darrisaw didn't make sense, and picking Tyree Wilson over Jalen Carter was also a surprise. Even selecting Byron Young at defensive tackle when there were better options raised some eyebrows. On the other hand, Reggie McKenzie was probably the best general manager the Raiders had in recent years before Tom Telesco. He's highly respected in the league, and hopefully he'll get another shot as a GM in the future. We'll have to wait and see how things work out for him and Ziegler in Tennessee. Now, let's wrap up with something interesting Pete Carroll said yesterday. Carroll has coached multiple teams, won a Super Bowl, and even found success in college football. He knows what it takes to build a winning team. One key thing he mentioned was how he plans to structure the Raiders' roster, especially when it comes to the quarterback position. He talked about the importance of supporting the quarterback and making their job easier. Carroll explained that quarterback is the hardest position in professional sports, and the team needs to do everything possible to help. That means running the ball effectively, protecting the quarterback, taking care of the football, playing great defense, and making smart decisions on special teams. In short, Pete Carroll is focused on building a strong, well-balanced team that gives the quarterback the best chance to succeed. The Las Vegas Raiders are officially searching for a new defensive coordinator, and one of the first candidates to interview is Rob Leonard. Many fans already know him. He was the Raiders' defensive line coach last season and did a great job. According to Jeremy Fowler, Leonard had his interview on Monday. This makes him the first in-house candidate for the job. In his first press conference, Pete Carroll mentioned that the team would consider coaches who were already with the Raiders last season, and Leonard is one of them. It's exciting to see Leonard being considered for such an important role. However, being a defensive line coach is very different from being a defensive coordinator. A coordinator has to plan the entire defense and call plays, which is a huge responsibility. Leonard has a bright future in coaching, but it's unclear if he's ready for this step. If he gets the job, Pete Carroll will likely help guide him as he takes on this new challenge. At the same time, the Raiders are exploring other options. Former defensive coordinator Patrick Graham has been interviewing for jobs with other teams, including the Jacksonville Jaguars. If he leaves, it will be a big loss because he's a highly respected defensive coach. Right now, the Raiders are weighing all their options. They could bring in a new face, or they might decide to stick with a coach who already knows the team. Either way, they're taking their time to make the best choice for the defense. The Raiders have some really talented players in the secondary, and their defense has the potential to lead the team. If they can stay healthy and add a few key pieces, they could become a defense-first team. Imagine pairing a player like Abdul Carter with Max Crosby on the defensive line. That would create a dominant pass rush. With guys like Wilkins and Butler in the middle, stopping this defense would be tough. If the Raiders build their team around a strong defense, they can focus on controlling the game, running the football, avoiding turnovers, and playing smart, conservative offense. Of course, there are still areas to improve. Linebacker is a position that needs attention, and while the secondary is strong, injuries hurt them last season. Marcus Epps was out for the year, and players like Nate Hobbs, Jack Jones, and Corin Bennett all missed time. If the Raiders add depth and clean up a few weak spots, their defense could carry them to success. But defense alone isn't enough. The Raiders also need a reliable running back. Some teams, like the Ravens and Chargers, have had success signing veteran running backs instead of drafting them. The Ravens got Derrick Henry, and it worked well for them. The Chargers also found success with a similar approach. The Raiders could take the same path, sign proven running backs instead of gambling on rookies. This brings us to the quarterback situation. There are several quarterbacks available for trade, but is Geno Smith a realistic option? It seems unlikely. He had a solid year with the Seahawks, and they just missed the playoffs after getting hot late in the season. Staying in Seattle makes more sense for him than reuniting with Pete Carroll in Las Vegas. That means the Raiders need to explore other options. Some people suggest drafting a quarterback like Sheeter Sanders with the 6th overall pick, or targeting Jalen Milroe or Jackson Dart in the 2nd round. But this year's quarterback class isn't very strong. Drafting a quarterback early would mean committing to him as the future leader, and Pete Carroll may not be ready for that. He might prefer to build a stronger overall roster first. A smarter move could be signing a veteran quarterback. Someone like Daniel Jones could be an option, giving the team experience at the position while they continue to build around their defense. A quarterback like Sam Darnold might not become available, but you never know. If his team decides to move forward with J.J. McCarthy, they might look to trade Darnold. The Raiders would likely have to give up draft picks to get him, but he could be a solid option. Darnold's situation is similar to Baker Mayfield's when the Buccaneers picked him up in free agency, and that move worked out well for them. If the Raiders go the free agency route, Daniel Jones is one option. Derek Carr could also be available, though he wouldn't come through free agency. A more realistic option might be Joshua Dobbs. He looked really good for the 49ers and has had success when given opportunities. Dobbs, at 29 years old, has mostly been a backup, but he started for the Cardinals last season when Kyler Murray was injured. He played well, and the Raiders could consider bringing him in. Another potential option is Malik Willis, who is currently a backup quarterback for the Green Bay Packers. Willis is under contract through 2025, so the Raiders would have to trade for him. However, if the Packers don't plan on keeping him long-term, they might accept a fourth-round pick in return. Overall, going with a veteran quarterback makes more sense than drafting a rookie. While rookies have upside, many of them struggle to succeed in the NFL. That doesn't mean the Raiders shouldn't draft a quarterback at all. If they wait until the third round, they could still find a solid player. Names like Jalen Milroe and Jackson Dart might be available in the third round. There's also Gabriel Dillon and a promising quarterback from Canada who was at the CGS All-Star Game and recently got an invite to the Senior Bowl. Brady Cook is another name to watch in the later rounds. Even Shedeur Sanders could be a possibility depending on how things unfold. The Raiders have plenty of options, but choosing the right one will be key to their success. There are a lot of reports suggesting that Shedeur Sanders could be available in the second round. If that happens, I'd take him without a doubt. In fact, I'd even consider picking him at number 6 overall. That said, I understand why some scouts have concerns about him. Some say he's not the most athletic quarterback. Others point out that when he feels pressure, he tends to run instead of stepping up and making the throw. It will be interesting to see what happens. I'm not a quarterback expert, so I trust that John Spytek and Pete Carroll will make the right decision. Both of them have had success with veteran quarterbacks before, and this year there are plenty of experienced QBs available. There aren't as many great young quarterbacks in this draft, so it might make more sense to go with a veteran and then draft a young guy in the later rounds. We'll see how things play out. Let me know in the comments what you think about the Raiders' direction under Pete Carroll. Do you agree with the moves they're making, or do you see things differently? If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you next time with another one.